Hey, everybody, welcome to The 7. I'm Steve Leary, and today we're going to look at Winter Park and discuss the biggest thing that really few people are talking about and probably why. My three guests today: Pete Weldon is a longtime resident, former city commissioner, successful entrepreneur, and founder of winterparkperspective.org, which is a fact-based blog, imagine that everyone in Winter Park should be signed up for. Jack Miles is a long-term resident also. Jack spent 35 years as a C-suite operations leader in Fortune 50 firms in North America, 2 years in Tallahassee as a secretary of Florida Department of Management Services. And Leslie O'Shaughnessy is a Winter Park property owner and small business owner and has held a number of positions in the private sector and worked in government at the local, state, and federal level, and was present during the last conversations regarding today's topic. Guys, welcome.
Hi there.
Thank you.
Thanks
Hello.
for having me, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. So today's topic, I'm going to go into a little bit of detail so we're not explaining all of this at every question, but I thought for those that are unfamiliar with this, to help frame the discussion, this would help. The City of Winter Park's proposed acquisition of the United States Post Office property, which is conveniently located in our beautiful downtown. So I know many are unaware of this, and they're unaware of the actions the commission has taken, and it's pretty clear that some of the commissioners and maybe some residents like that some people aren't truly up to speed on it. In the early 2000s, city leaders put out an RFP to develop the west side of Central Park. And the project, known as the Carlisle, was chosen from a number of applications. There was some concern about the project, some deserved, some not, some demonization. But the project was shelved, and not after costing taxpayers somewhere close to $5 million. In an effort to prohibit this from happening again, in 2007, the city secured a formal appraisal on the property, and with the existing C2 zoning, and we'll get back to that, the property was appraised at around $7 million. To prevent redevelopment of the property in the future, in 2009, I believe it was, the City Commission modified the zoning to PQP and Parks and Rec. This means that the site where the post office sits is zoned to be a park. In 2014, the city secured another formal appraisal, which now valued the property at between $1.8 million and $2.4 million from $7 million. Because again, the revised zoning provides that the only logical buyer of parkland would be the city of Winter Park. Over the past decade or so, a small group continued to push the immediate purchase of the site, which has never actively been for sale. The rationale really has been twofold. We have the money, which is ironic because we have the money due to the fiscal restraint of past commissions, and someone else may buy it and build condos. The USPS has consistently rebuffed our approaches, and previous city commissions made the prudent decision to cease negotiations when the price to acquire the property began to float past $10 million. So with that as a background, Pete, let me start here.
Sure.
In addition to being a city commissioner, you also served on the P&Z Citizen Advisory Board. Commissioner Carolyn Cooper recently sent out an email that referenced the Carlisle project to rile up her base in an effort to drum up support for this pet project of hers. The change from C2 to PQP Parks and Rec zoning is really important to this entire discussion. And can you cover why that is, Pete, given your experience?
Sure. The zoning determines the available uses in the private market for a piece of property. And if the uses are only for public use, being a post office or perhaps a library or a park, and we all know what a park is, then the value of that property commercially is obviously significantly less than it is if it has commercial zoning and you can build a mixed-use facility, for example, on it. I would also note that the zoning here isn't really, in my mind, isn't the critical component. It's the readiness to spend whatever someone wants in order to indulge their personal desires using taxpayer funds. That's really where we're off base here.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that because I was going to go to Jack next to really talk about the value here. Jack, professionally and privately, you've been involved in many real estate transactions. Talk to the appraised value, the price being discussed, this commission's approach, what some have called this commission's fiscal malfeasance. Is there perhaps a better approach?
Thanks, Steve. And sure, there is. Number one, this project sort of lacks a strategy as to what it is we really want to accomplish and why. That's number one. Number two, the thing you never want to do when you're going into any kind of a business transaction is be in a position where you're not prepared to walk away. We have, in fact, fallen in love with owning that piece of property. The Postal Service knows it. They didn't want to talk to us. We keep going back at them again and again and again. Fell in love with wanting the property. And, the sort of the sky is the limit when that happens, when you've got somebody that really wants something and there's not a fiduciary responsibility to the city of Winter Park taxpayers. People become willing to spend whatever it takes to go out and accomplish a desire. And we don't really have a reason and a strategy to go off and do that right now.
Yeah, I think besides not having a strategy, it's a really weak negotiating position, right? And they talk about the one maxim in real estate is location, location, location. But there's a couple others, right? Value, and we talk about this, is really what someone is willing to pay you for the property. And the third one is, everything is for sale at some time. And if we keep upping the ante and keep telling them we will pay 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times the value of their piece of property, it might just happen. And this commission has really shown no restraint on setting a cap on that. Hey, Leslie, this city commission has allocated $15 million to acquire a property that was professionally appraised for $2.4 million. The way they've divvied this up, excuse me, is $14 million from the CRA and about $1 million from the Parks Acquisition Fund. You and your family own property in the CRA. And I'm just wondering, has anybody spoken to you or others that you know of in the CRA about this level of spending with your money? Have they given you alternatives, other things they could be doing?
No. It's a very simple answer, no. Until this conversation, a lot of this, absolutely. There's been no communication from the city, no conversation. So that is all I have. No.
Well, and I think it's interesting because I'm not sure some people understand what a CRA is. And to me, the fascinating thing about a CRA, which is an agreement between local municipalities and county municipalities to take the tax, the incremental tax dollars and reinvest it in an area, considered a area that needed some reinvestment for redevelopment. And it's a geographic area. It's time. There's a time frame on it. The really fascinating thing to me about this, though, is the resolution that some of the folks on the commission had a hand in drafting. And this was from 2019. And one of the lines in this resolution was the City Commission of Winter Park has recognized that the distribution center located on the property is not compatible with Central Park, the upscale nature of the surrounding uses, or the desire to promote economic development downtown. A CRA's one of the major things is to increase economic value in an area. And so in the resolution, the city is literally saying that a post office does not help it's not an economic driver for an area. And yet, if we are going to move the post office to another area, it's got to be within the CRA to use CRA dollars. So how can you say in one document a post office is not an economic driver and then move it to another area within the CRA, which is created to spur economic development? It's counterintuitive.
I would also point out that Commissioner Cooper is on record as saying at one point that she would not pay 1 penny less. I'm sorry, that she would not sell a piece of city property for 1 penny less than the appraised value. And now she's urging us all to pay 5 to 10 times more than it's worth, as far as the post office is concerned. So this is not a rational process, obviously. This is a process of personal agendas. And the voters haven't been involved. The residents haven't been involved. We spent $8 million to buy 25 acres of our golf course. It was quite some time ago, in the 1996, I think. And of that, there was a $5 million referendum that the voters overwhelmingly approved. But in this case, we're spending $15 million for 2 acres, and we have no voter involvement at all. And I think that's telling.
Well, and I think it's intentional. And Peter, you were on the commission with me at one time when I asked for support Maybe you had just gotten off the commission, but I asked for this to go to referendum. I said, why not bring this to referendum? Let the public know. If the public wants to spend 5 times that money, then they should be involved. Les, to that point, what else? What are some of the things? I mean, you and your family are very active in the community. You're very active in youth activities. Where would you like to see it spent?
From personal experience, having kids that have spent a lot of time out at MLK Park, whether it be lacrosse or Pop Warner, I think that the issue for young families and a lot of grandparents as well is having access to workable, usable fields. And I spent many years out there where you're in a club and you're participating in something, and those fields are underwater. And if the conversation, and I think that's part of, I have a lot of questions around all sides of this, is around, are we taking CRA dollars for this post office, and there are other needs like those of our kids and our families with playing fields? I think that's a worthy conversation to have, because when it's underwater, you're still paying that money to be in a club. Your kid shows up ready to play, and they can't if these fields are not able to be functional.
Hey, Les, while we're on the spending of this money, and then I'll go to Jack, because I think, Jack, you can touch on this too, or any of you can. You and I were chatting the other day about it, Les, and the comment that you made to me, which I thought was really hasn't even been brought up yet. I think it's incredibly insightful and hasn't even been discussed yet, is our tax dollars go for things like this already. We pay our tax dollars go to the federal government to build new facilities, new post office facilities. So, I mean, touch on that.
Well, I think a lot of that comes from, as you referenced before, a prior experience and exposure in conversations around this project years ago in another position. And I agree with Jack completely that what's lacking is a strategy. During those conversations, my takeaways at that time were, yeah, the post office said, well, we don't have a need or a desire to move, but if you want to make us an offer, it was a little bit like, go ahead and make my day. And which leads to all sorts of, and the gentlemen have already talked about, the spending. When you fall in love with something, you just got to have it. But I think that a lot of the questions I have maybe come out of that experience. And when you sit there and during that meeting, I learned that every urban core, it's federally mandated, must have a post office, even if it's just a retail space. So we're already, with our federal taxpayer dollars, we're providing for our post office. And yet now in this city, we're going to be paying again for a brand spanking new post office and distribution center. And at that time, there were conversations, do we build them together? Do we do them apart? But there were also conversations that it would include the smart technology that is used today. So my mind goes to, aren't we buying a post office again that we've already paid for? And two, if we as a city take this responsibility to buy the property, build a new post office and distribution center with smart technology, what happens to those jobs if automation and smart technology comes in? Are we losing those jobs? So I just think there are a lot of conversations that could be had around this that I'm not hearing.
Jack, you want to touch on any of that? I mean, I was going to go to you and ask you really about the where the new facility could go. They're as far as I know right now, they were discussing one property in particular, right in kind of the midst of Hannibal Square, right, where again, members of this commission have said we're never going to build anything but single-family homes, and we've got to protect the historic nature and the character and protect these people from being overrun with commercial entities, blah, blah, blah. But hey, you know what? Maybe we can drop a post office and distribution facility over there, and that'd be okay because, we're already blowing $15 million. Why not just continue with the hypocrisy about fiscal restraint and move that into, popping a distribution facility in the Hannibal Square. But where could this go, Jack? Have you looked at that?
Well, I mean, just logically, when you take a look at the convenience, I mean, I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and says, "Hey, I want to go to the post office today," right? But there's a lot of people that have post office boxes there. When you look at the number, there's a large part of that space actually that is actually is post office boxes. It's convenient. There's parking there. It's close to the city core. It's got a lot of the attributes that you would actually want in a postal facility. So take that information and then say, well, where else do we have that? I'm hard pressed to come up with a spot. And by the way, I mean, this is sort of like a problem looking for a solution. It's, if you can't come up with a scenario about where we would put it and be able to lock that down, how can you go and even have a conversation about agreeing to purchase something, build a new facility, and relocate it? So I think no matter what you do, I mean, you've probably got two barriers ahead of you. Number one is that if the commission sees this as open space and green space, that probably means demolishing the building. And, just wait for the outcry on that, because it could be perceived as being, a building that has historical value, whether it's mid-century modern, or we have the whole situation about the mosaic on the outside and how will that be? I mean, there's just the parade of the horribles behind this. And on top of that, where do you put it? And we don't have an answer to that.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because the 32789 did a story on this in September, and the city asked for a correction to be made to the story recently, and it says here, I'll read it directly from the 32789's Facebook page. Correction: the original version of this story, published on September 1st, 2021, said that city leaders have expressed the desire to demolish the post office building. To clarify, city leaders have expressed a desire to expand green space in Central Park, but have not discussed demolishing the USPS structure. Now,
I interpret that as meaning that if this continues along the course that it's taking, that the commission will approve a couple $1 million more to preserve the facade on the current post office someplace on the property that does not interfere with the green space.
well, perhaps I'm a little more cynical. I took that to mean we got caught, because we've always talked about demolishing that building. And now some historic preservationists are looking at it going, oh, you can't take down the mosaic. So, well, and again, I will turn to the resolution, which reads in part, as the city and surrounding region increases in intensity and density of land uses, we need added green space. The need for added green space has grown substantially. There has always been the discussion that it would all be green space. And actually, during the discussion of the resolution, we had on the dais the discussion, perhaps we can leave it a little bit more open so that there is maybe a restaurant or something in that park space. And as we said, Commissioner Cooper was very adamant that this would all be green space. So they're walking it back a little bit now, that they never talked about demolishing that building when that was always the plan. Hey, Pete, real quickly.
I have a question.
Sure,
just to be clear, that property is not on a historic registry. I understand the mural is. It's a question. I don't know the answer. I'm asking.
It's a great question. They say now, I believe you're correct, but I would say also that in one of the studies, a study that was given on the downtown district, this is considered, the mosaics are considered a contributing factor to the historic nature of downtown Winter Park.
Okay.
Hey, Pete, this commission is calling for it to be torn down, replaced by green space. And I think what people don't understand, too, is part of the deal was that the city would not only relocate and build, they would also pay for new equipment to outfit the building and do it all with residents' tax dollars.
Correct.
Why do you think, maybe this is a rhetorical question, or not maybe, it is, but why do you think this is not getting more attention? Why aren't there emails and why aren't there stories in some of these blogs who would tell you that they're so protective of the city's citizens in the city of Winter Park?
Well, I don't intend to attribute motives to our current commissioners. Certainly, those who want this to happen, and it seems to be all five of them currently, and we need some rational discussion in the community that seeks to influence all five of them, and hopefully three of them will reverse course, at least three of them, once the substance of these considerations are well vetted amongst the voting public. So I'm not going to attribute any motives other than an emotional bent that serves no rational purpose for the interests of the citizens of Winter Park now or in the future.
Well, I think,
Well, I
Steve,
would.
too, when you look at this, one of the challenges is that typically nothing becomes an issue in Winter Park until it's past being an issue. So it's
I think
after
that's
the
the hope here.
decisions are made. Folks don't usually pay attention to what's going on until it sort of blows up. And then it becomes a big issue. And I've never understood that in Winter Park because I've never seen situations like that elsewhere, is that people were following the developments as they went along and they try to stop them before they become an issue. In Winter Park,
Right.
it's got to become an issue first.
Right. Right. Well, I think part of that is you're talking about entering into negotiations. As I understand, there's a couple property owners who may be interested in selling their property, leasing their property, or some type of some type of arrangement with the city and the postal service to put this product on their site, which is interesting. You enter into now. I own properties in the CRA as well, and nobody's ever asked me what I'd like to see in the CRA. But I can imagine a day where I wake up and I find out that the city's in negotiations, serious negotiations, with the postal service and a private property owner who perhaps could own property right next to mine, where they're going to put a post office, distribution, and retail facility. And you don't think that's going to affect my property value? I mean, we're not being notified of any of this stuff. We don't. I mean, they're supposed to be helping the CRA. That's what the CRA was constructed for, to help the economic engine in the CRA. And this is doing nothing but running.
Well, you touched on another issue that's important here, Steve, and that is the misuse of CRA funds generally. CRAs have been notorious as their misuse, exactly because they're not accountable to the voters. And I think we have that case right here as an example in Winter Park now.
Well, I would tell you, Pete, when I served, and Jack, I'll get to you because I know I want to hear your thoughts on this. I worked with some folks in Tallahassee when the CRAs, they felt that there was abuses in some CRAs a little bit further to the south of us. And they always thought about Winter Park CRA as being a really nice example of a well-run CRA. And this will definitely attract attentions, and we will be put on the naughty list. And you don't want to be on the naughty list at the state capitol. Jack.
Exactly. I think I wonder whether the state could actually come back at some point and question the prudence of spending the money out of the CRA funds as the city of Winter Park is doing. So when I went to Tallahassee, I didn't know CRA from anything. But one of the first things I heard up there was the big dust up over CRAs and the fact that so much was done with the CRAs to sort of circumvent the normal process of public review of spending public money. And here we are in Winter Park, based on the people that we're talking to right here, two of which own property in the CRA, and nobody's been talked to. So it's that, and the whole referendum question, I think, is another thing. If you start to take a look at how should this money be spent, considering the magnitude of the dollars, ask the public what they want. What's wrong?
Well, at least ask the CRA taxpayers, right? Leslie.
Yeah, Jack, I agree, especially since, as we've seen in the past, and including the leadership that is there right now, this city can do a really good job communicating, hashing out. We've done, tons of charrettes, a lot of work that's been done in community public conversations. And for something as big as this, which has been significantly important, you talked about hard to find another place that really feels as ideal to what I consider our community water cooler. Because that's, to me, is, and we've had a post office box there for over 30 years. There are some boxes there, but it does feel to me like a cultural community water cooler. And there should be more conversation, even though it's a little bit, to your point, late. But I do think that people, if they are not aware and they're not able, because they don't have all of this information, a lot of the stuff that all of us, maybe have a different piece of, we can do a better job as a city. And I think so can the leadership from the city in helping to have this conversation, because it's it's important and it's a lot of money. And I don't think people understand all the corners.
Hey, Pete, you and I chatted at one time, and you were talking about some other. Now, we talked about parks and where this money could possibly go rather than just to the post office property. But,
Yep.
I mean, there's probably any number of things. What's kind of, give me a couple items where this money could be spent to better the lives of Winter Park residents, guests, and businesses.
Well, there's the obvious uh, opportunity to continue to improve MLK Park, and I think Leslie touched on that. And it's not just the fields; it's the usability of the park more generally, not just for sports teams, but for the general public, and its integration with the new library and event center. I don't. The other significant opportunity that I'm interested in is leveraging what the Frog Company is doing, connecting our city resources via fiber optics, and most of that is in the CRA. If we could leverage the fiber that money into a fiber optic and wireless infrastructure throughout the CRA, and lease it to all communication companies that may have an interest in serving the residents and businesses, we can experiment with essentially how to run that kind of a business for the potential of expanding it citywide as the undergrounding program is finished up in the next few years. And I think that's an attractive strategic thing to look at closely.
Well, and I think, just touching on that, there's also the opportunity to expand and significantly speed up our electric undergrounding to help businesses and small and residents who are kind of struggling through COVID. We talk about there being a deficit of parking downtown. There's opportunities to provide that for residents of Winter Park. There's a whole bunch of things we should be doing that would contribute, I think, more positively to the citizens' lives. I want to cover just a couple things before we get out of here. One of the things, since we're in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood here in the city of Winter Park, I think the word of the day here is waste to me. I think of $15 million for a $3 million piece of property, $50,000 to pay, which, again, people don't realize that's how upside down this is. The post office said just for the right to talk to us, we had to pay them $50,000.
And we did pay them $50,000.
Yeah, and we did. We actually agreed to pay more if we continue the negotiations, but we've only paid $50,000 up to date. We're paying $75,000 annually for a lobbyist to convince the USPS to do the deal. Not to mention the thousands of staff hours and hours that is keeping people from doing their job running our city. So that's a little bit sad to me that we're actually the waste on this project has just gone out of control. So I want to recap it. It seems like residents kind of like the post office where it is, regardless of the usual fear mongering. It doesn't look like there's really any threat because of the rezoning of someone else buying it and building a high rise. They'd have to go in front of the city commission, which has over the past, 5, 6, 7 commissions indicated no desire to have that done. There's no push from the public to tear it down. They like the building. They like where it is. It's it contributes to our downtown. Doesn't seem that I know of or anybody's aware of that there are impact studies on a new location. So neighboring property owners of a potentially new location have not been brought into the conversation. Payers into the CRA have not been brought into the conversation. We haven't seen anybody asking for it to be in their neighborhood. $15 million is a gigantic waste of money, 5 times the value. Destruction of the contributing historic asset. We can use the $15 million in any number of other ways to improve our community, and we should not be double taxed and pay for a new facility when we already pay our federal tax dollars to build a facility. Guys, I want to thank you for this. We'll see where this ends up. If you're disgusted, as many people who come up to me privately who don't want to get involved because it seems their names end up on some of the bloggers in Winter Park and they get attacked. But if you are disappointed in the actions or want to know more, please reach out to your city commissioners, you can email them at mayorandcommissioners@cityofwinterpark.org. Thanks again for being here, gang, and thanks for everybody for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.
Good to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.